Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in so far. We're going to do our normal couple-minute pause here to allow other people to tune in. I'm going to do a couple tests with the um, streaming and everything. All right. It looks like I still have audio while presenting, so that's good. Alrighty, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, this is live and recorded, so if anyone's joining late, they can always catch up. But we're going to jump right on in to our Get Fit Hot Topics number 3. So today's topic, as it says number 2, is topic number 3 today, but intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting, or referred to as IF, is a dietary approach that alternates between periods of eating and fasting. It's not a diet in the traditional sense, but rather an eating pattern that focuses on when you eat rather than what you eat. Today, we'll dive into the physiological mechanisms behind intermittent fasting and its potential health benefits. As always, we have our medical disclaimer. This discussion is for educational purposes only and should not be considered as medical advice. Consult with a qualified healthcare professional for personalized guidance regarding any nutritional or fitness recommendations. The author of this discussion, that would be me, bears no responsibility for any outcomes resulting from the implementation of the information provided. All right, great. We have audio today. That's helpful. So just to get started here, again, as per usual, any questions will be answered at the end, but feel free to type them up during the presentation, as that's really helpful for me to have a list of questions to kind of start to look at as we're wrapping up towards the end. So again, if you think of something, it's okay if you type up the question and I already answer it. I'll just skip it at the end, but feel free to type it up whenever. Any question you've ever had about intermittent fasting or a question that is prompted by something that we talk about today. So let's get into it. For the physiology of intermittent fasting, during our fasting periods, our bodies will undergo significant changes in terms of our metabolism and our hormones. A key mechanism that is increased is our insulin sensitivity, which allows cells to better utilize glucose for energy and reducing our blood sugar, which is really helpful for health. Another mechanism that happens is called autophagy, which involves the removal of damaged cells and its cellular components, which promotes cellular repair and longevity. Additionally, fasting also triggers ketosis, which is where the body shifts from using glucose or our carbohydrates to using ketones derived from body fat for energy. So hot tip number 1, how can you use intermittent fasting specifically for fat loss? So for weight management and fat loss, there's been numerous studies to show that intermittent fasting can be an effective strategy for this. By limiting the window and time that we are eating, this naturally reduces our overall calorie intake. You simply have less time to eat snacks or to eat anything. And specifically when we're shrinking the window of time that we eat, which is essentially all intermittent fasting is, we simply just can't go reach for the popcorn or the extra snack in the middle of the night because our fasting window has begun. Additionally, this promotes fat oxidation and metabolic flexibility, leading to greater fat loss while preserving lean muscle mass compared to continuous calorie restriction diets. So what does it mean by that? A continuous calorie restriction diet means you have a set number that you are not going to go above, which can be done in conjunction with intermittent fasting. But typically, when we're talking about the difference here in intermittent fasting, you have a little bit more flexibility with how many calories you can eat and don't have to be as particular with a specific number. But in continuous calorie restriction diets where you have a limit, it doesn't really impact the metabolism the same way. Our hormones can still fluctuate. We can still eat any type of food within that window. So having a restricted time window does give us more flexibility while providing more constraints, but it ends up being a little bit easier to achieve the goal, which is fat loss. You're also more likely to be intentional about what you eat when you're doing intermittent fasting because you're following these guidelines. So you end up inherently just being someone with healthier habits. Hot tip number 2, how can we use intermittent fasting to improve our overall health? Metabolic health benefits. Um, Intermittent fasting has been linked to improvements in various markers of metabolic health, including blood sugar levels, insulin sensitivity, and lipid profiles. Studies have shown that intermittent fasting can lower fasting blood sugar levels, reduce our insulin resistance, and improve cholesterol and triglyceride levels, all of which contribute to a reduced risk of metabolic syndrome and cardiovascular disease. So clearly, there's a lot of metabolic health benefits which are just happening to you once you start using intermittent fasting. There is a disclaimer, though, I want to make sure we go over. We already have the medical disclaimer in the beginning, but fasting specifically with individuals that have type 1 diabetes, it can impact your blood sugar levels and insulin requirements. So careful monitoring and adjustment of medications is definitely necessary if this is something you want to consider. Speaking to a doctor to make sure you're fasting safely to improve your standing in your diabetic scenario is also very important. The information here is, again, just education. Don't take it as medical advice. If you are someone specifically with type 1 diabetes, you should always consult with your healthcare provider before making these changes, just to make sure that your insulin and your blood sugar are safely monitored. Type 2 is different and considerably more safer for intermittent fasting because it can help improve your scenario and potentially take you out of a diabetic standpoint. Or if you're someone who has pre-diabetes, which would be likely a type 2 scenario, intermittent fasting can help you come back from that standpoint back to a regular metabolic situation, which can be definitely much more beneficial. There's a couple other health benefits we'll kind of just blast through. We could really talk forever about why it's great, and we'll get more into like how can you actually implement this and other questions about specific scenarios. But it can improve brain health and cognitive function by increasing your brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which enhances cognitive function so that you can think more clearly, potentially faster, and help you learn better. Research indicates that intermittent fasting reduces neurodegenerative diseases and the risk that are associated with that by promoting your brain health with age. One of the biggest things that ages in our body, other than our other internal organs, is our brain. And we notice that our cognitive function and our ability to grasp information does decline with age. So brain health and our cognitive function from intermittent fasting has been shown to improve a lot. Cellular repair and just overall longevity. We already talked about triggering autophagy and removing damaged cells, which can help you live longer. Other studies suggest that it may slow aging by just improving that cellular repair, which is a process that your body does try to do on its own, but intermittent fasting can help promote it at a greater level and also more efficiently. Your exercise performance and your muscle growth are definitely positively impacted by intermittent fasting. It can boost your performance and enhance your growth by increasing your natural human growth hormone levels, which is something that people do supplement with as they get older in age, or you may have heard of testosterone supplementation. But by simply doing intermittent fasting, we might be able to increase those levels naturally within our body. Research also shows that it can improve muscle adaptation and body composition, kind of like we discussed earlier, by improving your fat loss and promoting your weight management and helping you gain muscle. There are also physiological and behavioral benefits, improving your mood, your focus, increasing serotonin and dopamine. I know anecdotally in my own experience, when I used to do intermittent fasting when I was in college, I would definitely tell the difference between being in a classroom setting and being in a fasted state than being in a fed state. Typically, the fed state, meaning that you have been eating, your body is digesting food. So part of your energy is going towards the digestion as well. Whereas when you're fasting, all of your energy is on what you're focusing on, and you can definitely feel the difference, typically from the first day that you try it. Also, intermittent fasting fosters mindfulness and can reduce emotional eating habits. Once we kind of set a goal for ourselves or a very specific situation, it's a little easier to separate our emotion with our eating. Hot tip number 3, definitely important for intermittent fasting, especially if this is something new to you, to start slow. So practical tips to get started: start by gradually reducing your eating window and gradually increasing your fasted window. So an example would be starting with a 12-hour eating window and a 12-hour fasted window, then going to a 13-hour fasted window and an 11-hour eating window, and continuously going towards that 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of eating. And I would recommend when starting doing 2 to 3 days in each spot. So 2 to 3 days while having a 12-hour fasting window, 2 to 3 days with an 11, and on your way down until you can safely and healthily get to 8. Also, choosing a fasting method that aligns with your lifestyle and preference. So specifically, and for other reasons we'll get to as well, you shouldn't be doing this every day. Even if you feel great and things are working, it's still recommended to have some breaks in your diet. So I typically would recommend, if someone wanted to go, completely all out on their health, on their intermittent fasting, do it during weekdays, take the weekends off, let your body kind of shift up a little bit so that you can come back and still get all the major benefits and you don't get used to it. Also, very important, stay hydrated during the fasting periods, drink plenty of water. Herbal tea or non-caloric beverages are also okay. Coffee is fine, but it has to be black. Any calories will break that fast and mitigate the benefits we're getting from doing the fasting in the first place. Focus on nutrient-dense whole foods during the eating windows to ensure you're meeting your nutritional needs as well. All right, we're getting to fasting secrets, hot tip number 4. So don't tell anybody, but you can get away with more. So what does that mean, and should you? Essentially, if I was on a simple calorie restricted diet with a number, or a fasted diet, potentially with that number as well, I can technically, because of my body's improved metabolism, eat a little bit more calories or potentially a little bit less healthy options within a fasted window, because my body is going to repair and recover quicker when I'm in my fed and fasted window with intermittent fasting. Whereas if I'm eating kind of throughout the entire day and my metabolism is slow, I'm not digesting those calorically dense foods as well as I would be if I was fasted. That unhealthy meal or that fast food, for example, is going to impact me in a different way. So again, you can get away with a little bit more. The way I'll word this is flexibility in your dieting and not being as stressed about perfection when doing intermittent fasting. So you kind of use it as a crutch so that you don't have to feel so glued to the exact foods you can eat, and you can get away with a little bit more variety of super healthy and kind of questionably healthy foods and not go backwards as far. So that's one reason I would advocate for this if you're struggling with your current diet. Another one, you can use it to your advantage on vacations. So like we talked about in week 1, you can use intermittent fasting on a day where you know you're going to be eating a lot of food, because if we fast leading into that larger meal, we're going to shrink our appetite, which is the next point. And it's going to be more challenging to eat a lot of food anyways. So if we can use intermittent fasting to that benefit, we can also not really be able to eat as much during the fed window anyways. We can use it to stop drinking or eating super late at night, because if we have a cutoff, we can't put anything in our body other than herbal tea, black coffee, which we're probably not going to have in the middle of the night, or water. So if we have a bad habit of drinking or eating late at night, boom, we can kind of cut that off by just having the time. That's it. There's no negotiation. It's very simple. You're either fasting or you're not. And if you're trying to fast, you have to follow a cutoff time. We can use it to reset our sleep clock. So people with sleep issues or potentially having an issue falling asleep and staying asleep, if we stop eating earlier to allow our body to wind down, to finish digestion, not only will we feel better for other reasons, but we will actually lower our body's temperature, which is what we have to do naturally to fall asleep anyways, at a little bit sooner time, because our fed window has ended a little bit further from bedtime normally, which allows us to rest and feel rested, fall asleep, and stay asleep. A couple other things, definitely drink electrolytes. We'll go over my morning mineral cocktail, which is just ice water, squeeze half of a lemon, and then using a tablespoon of salt. And yes, salt, that's an electrolyte. There are some great brands out there. The one I recommend is Redmond's Real Salt, which is made here in the US from the salt flats in Utah. You can buy other salt, but you wouldn't want to be using iodized salt or table salt. You want more of a mineral salt that's going to have other minerals in there as well to get you filled up on those electrolytes. Typically, when fasting, a couple of the side effects are that you might feel a little lightheaded, groggy, potentially fatigued when you're first trying this. After your body's used to it, you definitely don't feel that. But getting those electrolytes in, especially the first few times that you try it, you won't experience that to anywhere near the same level if you didn't have them in you. And I also wouldn't recommend fasting before a tough workout. We'll get a little bit into fasted exercise in a moment, but if you're going to do a tough workout, a long run, definitely have some calories, specifically some carbohydrates, so that you feel a little bit better and don't worry about fasting on that specific day, or at least eat right before that exercise. Number 5, leverage fasting and exercise. So we'll get a little bit into that here. Consider a HIIT workout or a run during your fasted window. Again, not anything super crazy. If you're going to go run 10 miles or hike, I wouldn't do that fasted typically, especially if this is new to you. You could totally pass out or not feel good. So I wouldn't recommend that. But if we're going to go for a 1 or 2 mile jog, we're going to do a 30-minute HIIT workout. Experiencing that in a fasted state, burning our body fat as fuel, can definitely be enticing and exciting to try. It's not typically recommended to do fasted strength training workouts. Now, you might ask why. When we do strength training, we're using a different energy system than when we do cardio training. And in order to hit the maximum benefits of our strength training, which ideally is to get stronger and build muscle, we are going to want to have calories to pull from. Ketones and body fat just aren't as efficient of energy producing molecules in the body to promote that strength output or to have that heightened performance in terms of heavy. Performance improvements in terms of running or cardio-based workouts are definitely evident with a fasting window, and that's mostly because you don't have much in your body kind of weighing you down. You feel a little bit lighter, and you're able to kind of give it that full effort. I'm sure some of you have eaten before a tough workout and regretted that. So that's one of the few benefits, not necessarily physiological, but definitely mental and physical. So strength training, if you're going to work out tough, have a little bit of carbs before that. You can always break the fast right before that, and you'll still have the benefits of not having a bunch of food in you, but having some fuel for that workout. And the truth about calories and fasted workouts, if you're going to do a fasted workout, like some people are obsessed with fasted cardio and they have to go for their run without food in them, and that's fine. And that can definitely be preference. But here's the brass tacks of what that actually does in your body. You will successfully burn more calories during your exercise window if you are fasted than if you were fed. But because of that improvement in calorie usage during the exercise window, at rest for the remainder of that day, you will burn less calories on average than if you had exercised while fed. So ultimately, there isn't a huge benefit one over the other, because if I work out with food in me, I will burn less calories on average than if I was fasted. But now for the rest of that day, I'm going to burn more calories on average. So the best way you can leverage this is if you're going to do a longer cardio, but low or steady state cardio, like a jog or a long walk, do that fasted to maximize the time that you'll be burning more calories. If it's a short hit or something, it's not really going to make a huge difference if you were fasted or not. So you might as well have a little bit of energy in the form of food so that you feel better during that exercise, but just something to keep in mind so that you don't obsess one way or the other. You can also train your body to be more comfortable in a fasted state while doing some type of exercise fasted. So it's always recommended to try something. Again, a great example is just walking without eating, because you're doing something where you're burning excess calories and you're fasted, which kind of allows you to feel more comfortable in that state. Lastly, you can enjoy the meal even more after exercise. So one of my favorite things to do is, if I am fasted and planning to exercise, I'll do a 1 or 2 mile run. I'll do some core training, just something pretty relatively basic, nothing with heavy weight. And then I'll eat that first meal, and it'll feel so much better going down now that you burned a little extra calories. All right, number 6, we're just about to wrap it up. So again, if you guys have any questions, please start typing them up over here. I see we got one. That's awesome. And I will get to those questions momentarily. So if you have any questions on what we've covered so far, feel free to type them up, and then we'll start to talk about that in just a minute. But let's talk about breaking the fast. So tips on breaking the fast. We definitely want to prioritize protein. This is super important to replenish our amino acids after fasting, especially because it helps us get full the quickest. Out of every macronutrient we could consume, protein is going to make us feel the most satiated. It promotes less eating by making you feel full quicker while you are eating that meal, and making you feel more full after fasting. For example, animal protein takes typically between 24 to 72 hours to be completely digested out of your system. At varying levels, you definitely digest some of it extremely quickly and can utilize the amino acids. But in terms of the actual substance removing from your body, it takes most of the day, if not on to the next. And the reason being for that is, or the benefit of that is, you will feel more full going into that following day. This isn't animal protein as in just meat. It's any type of animal protein that we are getting will take slightly longer than a plant protein to be digested. So we can leverage that to our benefit by feeling a little bit more full. Incorporating healthy fats as well to promote satiety and absorption. So just like with the protein, the next thing on the list in terms of what's the most bang for your buck in calories and fullness is definitely fats. We know that carbohydrates we can eat all day long. Proteins and fats being a large portion of that first meal after a fast are going to help us totally maximize our ability to feel full. Next would be fiber-rich foods for digestion and our stable blood sugar levels, which is definitely, those would be carbohydrates, but fiber is a non-digestible carbohydrate. So something that kind of tags along with the carb, such as fruits or veggies is going to help us feel full, level out our blood sugar and help us feel good there. Also, we want to make sure we drink plenty of water before and during our eating window. We want to be hydrated. That's going to help us avoid that fatigue or head fog we might feel from the intermittent fasting. We also want to avoid processed foods. You'll be able to eat so much more of it when you're hungry like this. So if you break your fast with a bag of Doritos, that thing's gone. So just heads up, I wouldn't go for that. Smaller portions, your stomach is going to shrink when you do intermittent fasting. So be sure you don't eat the same amount you think you would eat on a normal day when you're starving, because it is smaller. You'll feel full a lot quicker and you might be uncomfortable. Also, you can drink caffeine to help stabilize your hunger at first. So when you first start intermittent fasting, you're going to be hungry. It's going to be challenging. It's definitely recommended have some level of caffeine. It doesn't have to be coffee. It definitely could be tea. And that is going to help you feel a little bit less hungry. A couple last things here, guys. We're going to go over the structure of the fast, and I believe this is my last slide. We'll get to your questions. Here's an example of what a fasting window may look like. Start eating at 11 and then stop eating at 8, and then eventually shrink it down from 11 to 7. And you can shift anywhere you want within this to get to an 8 to 10 hour window. Generally, 14 hours of fasting is the ideal minimum to achieve the benefits of intermittent fasting, and between 14 and 16 is the sweet spot. 16 hours or more is safe for men, not typically safe for women, specifically with multiple days in a row. The reason being is when you go beyond 16 hours, and specifically for the hormones within a woman's body, her hormone levels are indicative of being fertile or ready to have children. So if we get to a position where we haven't eaten for over 16 hours, our hormones will now change because it thinks that we're going into a starvation mode, which is not a safe environment to raise a child in terms of internally in the body. So women can experience some adverse side effects of doing too much in terms of fasting. Fasting can still be incredibly beneficial for women. It's just you need to be a little bit more cautious with how you do this. And this information actually is relatively new. These were found in studies in 2019. So when intermittent fasting first kind of hit the mainstream, there was not much information about the difference between male and female fasting. But now we know for women, it is safer to do just up to 16 hours and not more than 2 days in a row. But that's just a couple pieces of advice there. Our max safe recommendation for fast is to go up to 72 hours, but only after a long time of practice and safety precautions. You'd probably want to check with a doctor if you have any underlying conditions before doing a 72-hour fast. And also, it should not be something you try if you've never fasted before. Some people find a lot of benefits from doing a single 24-hour fast once per month, in addition to other regular intermittent fastings. But these are just a couple ideas here, guys. Typical recommendation is about 3 days per week. And again, women should avoid more than 2 days per row at a time. And hot tip number 7 is just do your best. So now we'll get on to some questions, and I'll check out what we got over here. Anyone else with questions, feel free to type them up. Are these ordered in the highest to lowest effects, or is it different for everyone? In terms of the benefits from fasting, those were not in any order. That was kind of just in the general order when I was doing my research to promote or to put together this slide. The benefits will definitely be different for different people. If someone is specifically, let's say, for example, someone is significantly overweight, they're going to get most of the metabolic benefits first because their metabolism and the way that they're digesting their food is likely the largest piece of impact that is going into how they weigh, how they do. So they might see benefits from a metabolic standpoint first. But the average person is going to see the most benefits from the cognitive function immediately because you kind of can feel that you haven't had food, and typically the focus, and if you're using it to leverage your ability to stay on task, you'll feel that pretty much right away across the board. But yeah, there is a little bit of a difference between what benefits you get more of depending on your current health. And the optimal fasting window, and then, okay, answered that question. Yeah, optimal fasting. Honestly, there's a couple ways to look at this. I would say that the optimal fasting window is prolonging the first meal longer. You'll just get a little bit more benefits if you wake up and wait a few hours. Normally, if you wake up and wait 4 or more hours, you're going to get the most benefits from your fasting just because your body's able to go from rest without food and then it starts to get hungry naturally. So if we just give it food, even if we, do our fasting window from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and we don't eat later in the day, that might be helpful for us to not snack late at night, but we're not going to feel the benefit during the day as much. So I would recommend, if fasting is new to you, try pushing back breakfast. It's also the easiest way to look at it. Typically, if you wake up and you get busy, a lot of us forget to eat breakfast anyways. So kind of using that to our advantage to start our fasting window might be the easiest way to structure our first couple times trying fasting. So I would recommend doing that first and then seeing which one for you ends up being best. All right. You're welcome for the session. If you guys have any other questions, let me know. We still have a few more minutes, but if not, thank you so much for joining us. I know this was a very informative session. I had a really great time putting together the slide set for this. There's a lot of great information in here. You will get an email with a copy of this as a PDF so that you'll have it for later. But yeah, if you guys have any other questions, let me know. We'll hang out here for about another minute or so, and then we'll close this one out for another Get Fit Hot Topics with Dalton in the books. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in today. We'll see you guys again next week. And remember, if you have any ideas for another topic you want to see, you can type them in the chat, or a little bit easier for us to see is type it in the comments of the video after it's posted, which will be immediately after I click that button there. But again, thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day and stay healthy.